With the new FAQ out and warbands being thoroughly tested, it's time for another tier list. Welcome to Wargames on Toast, all of you lovely people. It's me, it's Toast. How are you all doing today? It's well documented that I'm not the biggest fan of tier lists, but also tier lists are undeniably a whole lot of fun to make and to talk about. And today I really wanted to go back and update my tier list for the Bespoke Warbands in Warcry, especially now that dust has settled with new battle traits and even new warbands in the form of the Terratic cohorts and the Twist Wield. But before we get into all of that, it's time for a little bit of shilling.
I am shocked. Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
Please consider leaving a like, a comment and subscribing, as that helps me fight against that dastardly YouTube algorithmic demon. And if you want to help in a more tangible way, then please consider signing up to my Patreon or my YouTube members, or using my Element Games affiliate link down below when buying some new Warcry gubbins. A huge shout out to my patrons and members who you can find on screen now. Badoosh. But with all of that out of the way, it's time to get on with the show.
And now for something completely different.
And we are back in Tier Maker, and as you can see, we have all the Bespoke Warbands arrayed before you, ready to be ranked based on our 5 categories. As a stern but gentle reminder, this is just my opinion based on hundreds of games of Warcry. Your experiences and your opinions may vary, and that is absolutely fine. Let me know them down below, and this is, for the most part, just a little bit of fun. So looking at our tiers, we have 5 tiers based on different kinds of breads from around the world, kind of, sort of. We have the Mouldy Damper. These are the worst Bespoke Warbands I can think of, and ones I really think need a lot of help before you should really take them to the table, or they are so niche that I just don't personally want to play them. Then we have the Steel Croissant tier, and this tier is for warbands that are definitely playable, but still need a little bit of help to really see any kind of competitive viability. The Boulangerie Bloomer is for the mid-tier of warbands. These are good warbands who aren't quite as good as the upper tiers, because they're missing something vital to really elevate them. The Actually Cake tier is for warbands that are simply great and can definitely win events and are definitely, in my opinion, considered to be rather competitive. And finally, we have the Straight Up Spice tier, which are more or less the Actually Cake tier, but have the added benefit of being able to completely dominate a meta if left completely unchecked. Before I start slotting my guys into the tier list, I think it's probably wise to go over how things get to where and what I'm basing this off of. And for the most part, this is mostly based on competitive viability, based on the best possible list you can make with these warbands. And finally, whilst I'm not comparing this directly to the compendium, I will keep it in the back of my mind for making my decisions and bring it up if and when I remember. So yeah, that's it. Let's get straight onto it, and we start with the Skirgan True Blades. And I am always sad with the Skirgan True Blades because I love the aesthetic of this warband, but they really struggle. They have like one good thing, and that one good thing you just take as an ally in death, and everything else is like minimum like 10 points, 15 points too expensive, and their abilities are really bland, and unfortunately their battle trait, it didn't help matters like at all. They are incredibly restrictive because their chaff is expensive, their leader's expensive, and all the cool toys are also, despite points cuts, a little bit too expensive. So unfortunately, the Skirgan True Blades, they're our first Mouldy Dampers because they just don't have what it takes to be competitive. They are missing in nearly every single area, and you might as well just take a different warband and take the Exemplar in that warband instead, because you're going to struggle. They need some help. Next up, we have the new hotness, the Terratic cohort, and I have played these guys an awful lot, and my general takeaway is that I don't like them. They are very expensive. Some of their models are maybe like 20 points too expensive if you look at the stats and they compare it to other comparable stuff. Like, these guys are paying a hefty premium for what is ultimately a gimmick that barely works. Their Wild Dice gimmick is fun on paper, but is so hard to actually get working. It's restricted for some bizarre reason, and oftentimes it's such a massive gamble to do anything with these guys that I just can't get behind them in any meaningful way. But all that being said, I don't think these guys are moldy dampers. I think these guys are stale croissants for sure. They have some interesting tricks and toys, namely with their little bite attack they do that is just kind of devastating on certain things. And they have some tricks up their sleeves, but they definitely struggle, and I am not a fan in competitive. In casual play, they are hilariously fun. I love taking these guys in casual, but the second things start getting a bit scary, a bit spicier. Nah man, they just don't do it. Next up we have one of my first Warcry loves, the Tarantulas Brood, and conventional wisdom has started to move them slightly higher. In the past, they would have been moldy dampers compared to most people. I've always rated them slightly higher than that. So, in the past, maybe a steel croissant, maybe a boulangerie bloomer. However, I have played a lot of Tarantulas Brood, and I've managed to convince many other people that Tarantulas Brood are actually a secret hotness and have always been a secret hotness. And as the meta gets smaller, the Tarantulas Brood, it starts to climb, because the Tarantulas Brood has some of the best, or at least the cheapest chaff in the game, access to resurrections, and also with their battle trait, free resurrections, and even have nets in faction. You can take a 15-man warband with 2 nets and a resurrecting Tarantulas Brood, and frankly, most warbands can't handle that number of models, and it's even starting to do well competitively, to the point where I would be so tempted to straight up spice these guys, because they're on the verge of countering the meta entirely and forging a whole new meta in its name. However, bias is something I struggle with, and I think it would be safe to just for now slot these guys into actually cake. The Spider Swarm spam is really, really good. Off Meta Musings has recently adopted these guys, and yeah, he has had great competitive success, even winning an event recently with them. So yeah, they are starting to go places. They are super solid, and I expect to see more from them in the future. Next, we have the Chaos Legion, and the Chaos Legion are so upsettingly bland. I love the models, I love some of their abilities, namely Dark Pact, shout out to Kit, and unfortunately they struggle a lot. The guys are just not quite there. They lack the abilities, and they struggle to ally things in whilst maintaining a decent model count. They're a little bit overcosted maybe. They're definitely not moldy dampers, but I think last time they were in the Steel Croissant, and I think they stay in the Steel Croissant. But the Claws of Karanak, moldy dampers, going along with their vampire buddies, the Werewolf Boys, need so much help. They are one of the best looking warbands in Warcry. Games Workshop were cooking when they made the True Blades and the Claws of Karanak, but they were absolutely sleeping on these guys' rules. Their rules are bland, they don't really work all that well, and their models are really expensive despite cutbacks on that Hound of Wrath. They just don't see play. I've played them several times though, and I have struggled to make these guys work, and I think, honestly, despite their look, despite my love of these guys, I can't rate them any higher than moldy dampers, right? And like I said, I love the Tarantulas Brood, and I've held my bias back and put these guys in the actually cake tier, but even with bias, I can't even justify raising these guys at the Steel Croissant and sort of like lying to myself. These guys are moldy dampers all the way through. Moving on to Corvus Cabal, boom, straight up spice tier, let's go boys, no lies detected, no cap, no cap. Okay, pulling it back a little bit, okay, Corvus Cabal, as much as I love them being an S tier because they are genuinely fantastic, like with the Tarantulas Brood, I do think they are actually cake. They don't quite have what it takes yet to completely define or redefine or properly counter a meta as of now. However, they have gotten a substantial bump in viability thanks to the continued love Games Workshop has poured into Corvus Cabal. If every single low-tiered warband got the love and attention that the Corvus Cabal have gotten in the last year or so, then the game would be a better place. Alas, only the Bird Boys get the love, and yeah, these guys definitely land themselves comfortably in actually cake. If you haven't faced a competitive pilot running 2 Shrike Talons, then you have not lived to see true terror on the battlefield. These things are nasty when someone knows what they're doing. Next up, we have the Cypher Lords, and I refuse to put Cypher Lords in moldy dampers. These guys are absolutely not unplayable. I have proven this time and time again. I have ran all kinds of lists against all kinds of lists and all kinds of players, and I do well. The Cypher Lords can absolutely do work on the battlefield. They can absolutely top tournaments. They have in the past, although not recently. They're not good, but they are not moldy dampers. These guys require perfect play at all times. A single mistake and you will absolutely lose. And to be perfectly honest, you are relying on their allies to do most of the heavy lifting. The Cypher Lords are definitely steel croissant. They are nothing higher, but they are definitely not moldy damper. If you think they are, you are wrong. Okay, in all seriousness, if you think they're moldy damper, that's fine. I don't. And if you do, I would challenge you to play them more and learn the intricacies, because you can definitely do things with these guys competitively and casually. You can teleport a Hell Pit Abomination, and that is really goddamn fun. Next up, we have the Dark Old Savages, and these guys, you know, people might still croissant them because they're a bit old, you know, a bit finicky, but I think they have the tools and the potential to be boulangerie bloomers, and that's because a good leader in conjunction with cheap chaff tends to lead to a fairly good warband, and the Dark Oath, whilst not game-breaking or great, are definitely in that mid-tier for me, and I play them a lot and I thoroughly enjoy every time they hit the battlefield. Next up, we have my second love, and it's the Flame Seekers, and you would think I would put these guys in actually cake. I think the meta has moved in a direction where they struggle, because these guys really excel at murdering other mid-range and killing middling wounded high toughness things like Stormcast. What they don't do well against is fighting into ogres, and I am seeing more and more ogres as the meta gets smaller and smaller, and I think these guys have actually been bumped down, at least temporarily, into the boulangerie bloomer, and that makes me quite sad because I love these guys. I just don't think the current meta is supporting them, and their battle trait is pretty darn arse, which is kind of sad, so they've got no fun toys, and I'm still bitter about that. On to the Gorja Morpack. These guys are the hilariously fun pick in any competitive event, because these guys go into the event and they do not expect to win, because nearly every single pack has a treasure mission, and Gorja Morpacks, whilst they don't automatically lose those missions, may as well automatically lose all those missions. I still think they have some play, but not as a warband that's going to win events, more of a warband that'll do kind of okay in the middle of the pack, and just get kind of beat up on certain warbands quite brutally, because they are simply so violent on the battlefield. They are a murder faction through and through, and against the right lineup, they'll absolutely smash through everything. So Steel Croissant might be where some people might put them, because they do have such a glaring weakness. But I'm going to, you know, be a bit kind here and slot these guys in the boulangerie bloomer in the mid-tier, which I think is where they comfortably land. Sadly, the Horns of a Shut, a previous straight-up spicer, has been hit with nerf after nerf after nerf. Not only did their go-to ally get nerfed, but their chaff got nerfed. Then in the following update, their flame hurlers got heavily nerfed. So these guys have took a real serious hit, and frankly, I haven't seen them crop up since. They were once a very common warband, a very common faction to see, and their popularity seems to have waned after 2 back-to-back and heavy nerfs. I don't think they're straight up spice anymore. I don't even think they're actually cake. I actually think they're a boulangerie bloomer, because they've taken such a heavy hit on all the key areas that made them so strong in the first place. Next up, we have the Hunters of Huanxi. Straight up goddamn spice. These guys, despite getting nerfed into the ground with their reaction, got buffed to the heavens with their points reductions. These guys can field huge warbands that are incredibly fast, very hard to catch, and they just do work. They are one of the best bases to build an order warband from, because they are so cheap. You can take massive warbands and still fill them with seriously killing things. The Hunters of Huanxi continue to not mess around. These guys do not joke. These are fantastic and a wonderful skew pick for a meta as elite as we are in. The more elite the meta becomes, the better the Hunters of Huanxi will get. These guys have been great since off-meta musings proved they are fantastic, and they have continued to be a seriously good pick. Straight up spice, no discussion. Going on to the Iron Golems, historically me and Atan tend to overrate the Iron Golems because we really like that 4-weight profile and their chaff, and despite those solid strengths, the Iron Golems have really struggled to make an impact, and that's even with one of the better battle traits in a mono faction build, which is unfortunate to say the least. I would maybe put these guys in Boulangerie Bloomers simply because they're just not getting the competitive success despite all of their strengths, and I'm not entirely sure why, but then again, I also don't play all that much Iron Golem, so let me know in the comments down below. Next up, we have the Jade Obelisk, and the Jade Obelisk are absolutely terrible. I hate the Jade Obelisk with a passion. These guys are just bland. They're slow, they're clunky, they die too quickly, they don't do enough damage, they're too expensive. Their leader is straight up garbage. Their battle trait was an absolute hard miss. They're wordy, their abilities are wordy and awkward to pass. Like, if I ever wanted to play the Jade Obelisk, I would slap myself and instead just play Flame Seekers, who to me feel incredibly similar, but do what the Jade Obelisk want to do, but better. Moldy Damper, I do not like this warband at all. Moving on to the K-Knight Shadowstalkers, and there was quite a lot of hubbub here about the K-Knights possibly being a meta-breaking warband because of their twin crossbow spam, and I don't see it at all. I've played into the K-Knight Shadowstalkers several times since their popularity surged, and every single time I have had zero issues beating the crap out of them. I don't see what all the fuss is about. If you want to play K-Knight Shadowstalkers, there are better options in Warcry right now that do what they want to do and do it better in almost every way. I think these guys are a complete dud in that regard, and I think their star has well and truly waned. But that one build that people tend to use is undeniably somewhat effective sometimes, so I can't Moldy Damper. I don't even feel massively comfortable putting them in Steel Croissant. But I am. I don't think they're good enough to be Boulangerie Bloomers. I just don't. I don't see the fuss, the hubbub, right? Even the best lists I've seen, I don't understand it. I've never had issues with it. So anecdotally, I don't like it, and I don't particularly want to put them up there with these guys, because I don't think they're as good, frankly. So Steel Croissant it is. The Cruel Boys Monster Killers actually caked here. These guys continue to be little menaces, right? They're not straight up spice. Not many Bespokes will be straight up spice, but these guys are really good. The Beast Knob's fantastic, their Achilles stuff's fantastic, their Harpoon, they're so good, their Chaff, really good, their Monkey is really good. There's nothing here that's bad. Even the Flogger's good. The whole warband is super solid, super killy, super squishy, and heavily reliant on dice, but their burst damage is out of this world. They are so good, and I really enjoy playing them, so definitely actually cake. They've also seen competitive success in recent times. Their battle trait is kind of ass, but that is what it is, I guess. Actually cake is where they belong. On to the Pyregeists, and nearly everybody on Earth would put these guys in Moldy Damper, and I would counter that by saying that very few people on Earth have actually played the Pyregeists as much as I have in recent times, and I think the Pyregeists are much better. Maybe not much better. They are better though than what people say they are. I don't think these guys are down here in Moldy Damper. These guys are definitely Steel Croissant. These guys are sort of like on the level of the Cypher Lords for they can work, but they require a lot of work to work. And frankly, their battle trait really helped. The battle trait is really strong. If you start getting Pyre tokens, you start generating more dice, you start taking control of the battle with initiative phase dominance, ability dominance, and they do work. Their Deacons are good. What they need to elevate themselves from Steel Croissant to Boulangerie, or actually Cake, is to have some points reductions in key areas, namely Baleguard, Torch Wraiths, and their Flame Wraiths, who are all a little bit too expensive. The Deacon's fine. The Deacon is well priced. I like the Deacon a lot. 5-10 points here or there, possibly 15 for the Baleguard, and you've got yourself a warband. That's pretty darn good. They're well costed, and their gimmick can definitely work if you start to use those Torch Wraiths more, which is where most people fall down. Those Torch Wraiths are usually the first thing to cut, and the Torch Wraiths are how you get your resource engine going, and they're decent. I've had some good success, and I enjoy playing them. Steel Croissant. That's all I'll say about that. On the other hand, I hate the Idulin Riverblades. When I reviewed them, I had high hopes. I was fairly negative in the review, But I also had some positives to say, but since they've been out and I've played them more, they are just painfully bland. The only good thing in here is their chaff because it's cheap, and their leader because it's not awful, and everything else, that mid-range stuff is complete pants. They need help. You could argue they're steel croissant, you could even argue they're boulangerie tier if you want to be absolutely crazy, because cheap chaff means you can ally in all kinds of cool stuff, and that is a prerequisite for a good warband. However, I don't care. Simple as that. Mouldy, damper it is. Rockmire Creed, the unpopular cousins of the Horns of Hashut. I quite enjoy. They have cheap chaff, their leader is very good, and they have some pretty good things in the bloated ones, and even the carrion catchers have become more takeable because of points reductions, and their battle trait ain't bad, even if it is a little bit hard to set up. I like the Rockmire Creed quite a bit, but I am always torn between putting them in steel croissant or boulangerie. But you know what? I am going to plonk these guys in boulangerie. I quite enjoy playing them. They've got some really interesting burst. That Witherlord is like no joke at all. And they've got like one of the best nets in the game because it's a net that does flat damage as well. So they've got like damaging utility on a model that's also fairly hard to kill. They aren't played often, sadly, but they are good. They're mid-tier. They deserve the warm, buttery embrace of the boulangerie bloomer for sure. Going on to the Royal Beast Flayers. I love the Royal Beast Flayers because they're a lot of fun to play. They have a very unique playstyle in Warcry, and they do very well. There are like two players who play these guys to a super high level, and those two players dominate with the RBF. I play them on a much lower skill level than 3 Hero 1 Chaff's Kyle or Patron Andy Morris, but even then I can see the potential here. These guys are straight up spice. These guys are nasty, and the only real threat to their dominance at the minute is probably one box Ironjaws, who punish their weight style of play, but a well-piloted RBF list is really hard to stop, and I believe they have one of, if not the highest, win percentages in tournaments right now. So they are doing incredible work if you put in the hours and the games to get good at them. These guys are not an easy warband. They are hard as nails, but once you get it, you bloody get it, apparently. On to the Scions of Flame. I struggle with the Scions of Flame because I don't really see them do well, but I also don't play them all that much, and every time I look at them, their lineup ain't bad. Like, they've got some really good chaff, their mid-range is kind of solid, their leader's absolutely fine, even the Brazen Champion is kind of cool. So most of the warband, if not all the warband, is at least good, right? And they have some pretty funky abilities, and because of their cheap chaff, they can really lean heavily into ally support. And I think these guys are boulangerie bloomers. Even though I don't see much from them, I don't see them often, and I myself haven't had much success on the few times I've ran them, there's definitely something there, and from what I understand, Dan from the Salty Sea also thinks there's some source there as well. Check out his tier list that came out last week. Badoosh, check it out. It's a pretty good video. Going on to Spire Tyrants, I think Spire Tyrants are cool. These guys are like boulangerie bloomers at the bare minimum. But I'd be tempted to push these guys all the way to actually cake because their warband has cheap chaff. It has access to an abundant supply of cheap nets. Their leader is fine. They have a very aggressive playstyle. The Bestigo Destroyer is really good. They're ideal with allies, but they can run without them. And their battle trait, whilst nothing amazing, might actually work one day at some point. I think these guys have enough positives about them, despite being a little bit bland, that really does push them above some of the stuff in the boulangerie bloomer. I'm not convinced that they belong in actually cake though, because are they as good as Brood, Monster Killers, Cabal? I don't think so, right? I really don't think that. I don't think they're there. If there was a tier between these two tiers, they would go in that in-between tier, right? They would definitely go there. So I guess I've talked myself out of actually cake, and we're going to plonk these guys in boulangerie bloomer because they're not quite good enough to leave it, even though they are pretty darn good. And Splintered Fang are very similar. The Split Fang have the benefits of fairly cheap chaff, one of the best leaders in the game in the form of the Trueblood and his perfect net, well, her perfect net, but that's it, right? Everything else is a little bit naff in that warband. The snake gimmick doesn't work. Their mid-range stuff is like a little bit pants, a little bit naff. Their battle trade's pretty fun. But because of the Trueblood and that cheap chaff, they can really just build a list with some pretty powerful allies and kind of coast because they've got that perfect net, they've got that cheap chaff to flood the board, right? Again, I wouldn't put them in actually cake, although I could definitely see them rising to prominence as the meta gets more elite, right? Having 2 Trueblood and additional allies in your list might actually elevate these guys to something quite special. But right now, I think these guys are Boulangerie Bloomers with the potential to move up into actually cake if people start playing them and people start really putting the time to use those nets. Sadly, because you really are just taking them for those nets and that chaff, it might just be a case where we might just see more Truebloods as allies and the Splattered Fang just wither away and die in the moldy damper tier. Who knows? Who knows? So the Unmade, I recently did the Unmade and I think these guys are not quite mid-tier. They are just shy because they suffer from a hefty lead attack. That Blissful one, as good as he may be, is incredibly expensive, and I think that really pulls the warband back. If there was ever an update to reduce their points of that guy, badoosh, easy peasy. But for now, they're underplayed. They're somewhere in between Steel Croissant and Boulangerie Bloomer. But for now, I'll round down. We're going to round down here and plonk these guys in Steel Croissant, even though I do like them quite a lot. And they have seen competitive success. These guys have actually seen genuine success at Warhammer World because having a warband with 100% nets is good. And frankly, in a more elite meta, a shed ton of nets does actually do a lot of work. But if you wanted that, the Spire Tyrants are right there, the Splintered Fang are right there, and I don't think they quite breach the Spire Tyrant Splintered Fang wall, but they might in the future, and that's pretty darn exciting. Next up we have the Twist Wield, and the Twist Wield came and they left, and that was really it. I have seen maybe 2 people talk about the Twist Wield ever, and one of those people was me. I've played a decent amount of Twist Wield and they are kind of just fine. They suffer from being really gosh darn expensive and really gosh darn squishy, and that just means they get absolutely bodied in the current meta. They are having a really hard time because they just can't do the damage and they die way too quickly. And that's kind of sad. If the meta gets more hoardy, the Twist Wield is in an ideal place to capitalize because they have so much AoE in their kit, and their leader is generally fantastic. But as a whole, as a warband, they're missing something, and I just don't think they play well in the current meta, and these guys get the Steel Croissant treatment for sure. In a similar vein, the Untamed Beasts. These guys have some interesting lists, some interesting playstyles, but I still don't feel comfortable, despite playing them myself quite a bit recently. I don't feel comfortable putting these guys in Boulangerie Bloomers yet because I haven't managed to crack them. If I ever do crack them, I'll let you know and I'll move them up. And in theory, I do think the Untamed Beasts could Boulangerie Bloomer up. But for now, I think they're just shy. They're just shy, like the Unmade. They're just shy of that Bloomer status, and we're going to just put them on the in-between, right? The very tip of Steel Croissant, just about to fall off that tip into the warm caress of the Bloomer. And finally, we have the Wildercore Hunters, and the Wildercore Hunters are the Khainite Shadowstalkers if the Khainite Shadowstalkers were actually good. And these guys are so good, I would definitely plonk these guys in straight up spice. These guys have a fair few lists that are pretty darn solid, but the most popular right now is just lol all twin crossbows, and then you get shot off the board. It's pretty darn powerful, it does a lot of work, and even the most elite warbands can get shredded down into nothing by a hail of never-ending crossbow bolts. And as a side note, they look cool. They're basic dudes with a dog and some crossbows. What's not like? And that's the tier list, and I, for one, think it's pretty darn cool. We've had some really cool breakout success with the Corvus Cabal and the Trans Brood. The RBF and the Hunters and the Wildercore are staying up there as the dominant bespokes, the hard to play, hard to master, but once you get it down, they kind of dominate, right? And then this mid tier, I think, is a somewhat okay sign, because there's a lot of things here that kind of do okay, that are kind of, you know, they're viable enough and have the potential to maybe go one step beyond, right? And then the Steel Croissant, which is fairly substantial, right? A lot of these warbands are like a few points changes here or there to really just push them up a bit, right? And push them into that. Like, these are kind of cool tier. These multi-dampers, these guys need a little bit more help, I think. But I am hopeful that Games Workshop is listening to the feedback from the community. And frankly, the Claws of Karunak and the True Blades are such good-looking models, it would be a crime not to go in and fix them up so people can use their cool models, right? I've had these guys sitting on the shelf for a while, and they come out for fun, and then they go away again when they make me sad, which is almost immediately. So, like, you know, if these guys one day get an update, I would be so happy, and then we'll have a pretty darn healthy looking game. Oh my god, I forgot about Questar Soulsworn. Where are they gone? They're not on my list of things to drag. Damn, fix it in post. Badoosh, straight up spice, these guys are pretty darn good. Nailed it. But that is the end of this video. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments down below what you think of this tier list. What would you change? Do you think the Claws of Karunak are secretly straight up spice? Let me know, and we will have a good old natter about it. But until next time, lads, ladies, and everybody in between and beyond, ta-ra.
Groovy.
Boy howdy, it's Toast, and it's time for the post-toast credits. A huge shout out to my algorithmic demon slayers, Andy Morris, Armour Enthusiast 7, blah blah blah, Head Knight of Paint, Heinz D, Keep Plang, Long Run Hobbies, Lord Filax, Sable Saber, Mrs. Toast, Steve Bean, The Houston Toad, Tough Tootin' Baby, and Velas. As always, thank you so much for supporting the channel. I'll see you all next time.